houses, 4 on one side and 5 on the other. And I lived there until I was 16. I mean, I was young, I didn't have the problems that my mother had, you know, because it was like all the houses around there, 2 up, 2 down, outside water tap, outside toilet. And the only thing I can really remember that sort of annoyed people was the taps freezing in winter. On a Saturday night, sitting in a tin bath in front of the fire didn't seem like anything bad. You never ever thought disadvantage because everybody was the same. Everybody in that area lived in the same way, so it was just normal. The neighbours were great, and you know, they would always say, oh, your father's a good man and he's fighting for Ireland, and you know, they were he's not in jail for stealing or anything like that. You know, they were very good. I remember one morning he was arrested, and Maud Walker, who lived across the street from us, she came out and she was shouting everything at the police. I went to the wee nuns up in the grounds of the Long Tower Chapel, and then I moved to St Eugene's. It was probably primary 3, primary 4, and there was a nun taught the class, and she was particularly bad-tempered, and you know, and at the same time she would call me up and say, is everything all right at home? Is everybody waiting on the knock on the door for your father? But I never liked her because she used the ruler too often, and in fact I thought as a child I thought she was vicious. When we left St Column Street, we moved to an estate called Shantallan. Now we didn't stay there for very long because there was no buses right out it. The bus stopped at Belmont and then you had to walk out, and we got a move to Craigan. I was married from Craigan. My husband had been working there, and I went to England with him and lived there for 2 years. But I just couldn't wait to get home. I just wanted home all the time, and the whole civil rights campaign was starting. That was 1968, and everything was beginning to happen. I remember I was just back when Tommy McCall, Joe Coyle and Tommy Carlin were killed, and that was the day that Bernadette Devlin had come to Derry to be arrested. I lived in New Street, which was my mother and father, that's where they were living at the time. My mother died in October 1970, and in 1972 I had a brother, Colin, who was shot dead. I had met him just around 11 o'clock that night, himself and Eugene McGillan, and it was the end of a ceasefire. 12 o'clock, there had been a 3-day ceasefire, and 12 o'clock that night the ceasefire was up, and you sort of thought, well, something's going to happen. And then at 12 o'clock there was quite a few bombs in the town, and not long after that a friend of mine, Kit Carlin, came to the house to tell me that Colin and Eugene had both been shot and that they thought Colin was dead. And when I got to the hospital they were both dead, and my father was actually in town. Anybody that was in with him at the time would have told you he was up first thing in the morning to turn on the news, and they tried to keep the news away from him until he was, you know, sort of formally told, and he got out. And I mean, Colin was the youngest son, so you have your grief, and you know, but funerals like that are quite difficult in some ways because you have your private grief, but then you have the public, because they belong to so many other people, and they talk about the British having a stuff up their lip. They couldn't hold a candle to the Irish when it comes to that. They really couldn't, It's sort of, keep your dignity, keep your dignity. That stage I had moved to the Brandywell, and...
So what was it like living there?
I loved the Brandywell, so I did. And the house was great. It was a big house, so it was. And I mean, I had 5 boys and 1 girl, but eventually they were starting to grow up and leave, and it was left eventually that there was only myself and the youngest, Patrick, in the house. And then Patrick, he was knocked down and killed in an accident when he was 18. It was 2010. Patrick was mad, but he didn't really have a lot of talent on the field, but he had a lot of knowledge in his head. So he knew who was playing for who, how much they'd cost and all the rest. I have no interest in football myself, but we used to say, you're a pundit, son, you're not a player. It's just like a wee tribute to Padraig every year. I mean, the Over Sinn Féin do their tribute in the cemetery, and the failure, the committee for the monuments in the Brandywell and some of Over Sinn Féin, they do the Padraig Barton Memorial Cup. I worked for a while in a women's group there, and we would have ran education projects to encourage women who had a very negative experience at school to come back into learning. And a lot of them started really enthusiastic, but without self-confidence, and without self-esteem, it's very hard to carry that on. So myself and a couple of the other women from the women's group, we would have been out in the morning and round the houses and saying, right, come on, he's coming over, not to force them over, but to give them a bit of encouragement. The failure came out of Dove House. I remember the very first meeting that people were discussing the failure. Mary, Nicholas, Declan Kennedy, they were giving a report on the failure and Fable in West Belfast, and I couldn't believe that something similar would be happening in Derry. And the first year of the failure, what stands out in my mind is the concert in the gas yard, and to me that was the failure. But it grew so much from then, and it just took on a sort of whole new life, and political discussions and social discussions. There was discussions about subjects that people wouldn't talk about: abortion, gay rights. I'm trying to be sensible, but not over the top.
Okay.
And definitely, not sort of dismissive of it. I respect everybody's, sort of viewpoint on it. Mine was, I stayed at home, for the first 2 weeks, and then after that I realised, I can't live like this. I really can't. So I decided then to do my own shopping. I wore a mask and did what I could, and social distanced, and all that I could do. But I couldn't be stuck in the house. I think otherwise I might have ended up with more problems, like say mental health problems.